Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the BEwell Hub series, Business Entrepreneurial Wellbeing. Okay, I'm your host. I'm going to be the co-host with Rika Cossey today, not the host. This is an online Zoom meeting meaning that we can actually brainstorm and interact with the guest speaker, with the co-host. It's not just a presentation, not just a one-way traffic, but we can intervene and ask questions and share our experiences too. Today's speaker is Rika Cossey, and let me introduce the webinar title, or the online meeting title. The title is The Climate Emergency and Us. I specifically wanted Rika to come along because I personally would like to know what I'm contributing to the climate change or the climate emergency. Little, something or nothing. At least Rika is going to tell me all about that today. So a short introduction. Our climate is under threat, and with it, our life on Earth. Join us to explore the causes and potential solutions together. In the climate emergency and us, I'm reading this, that's why you're looking at your okay. This is, we'll dive into the urgent issue of climate change and discuss actionable solutions. This session is ideal for entrepreneurs, coaches, professional workers, and anyone concerned about our planet's future. Some of the highlights are understanding the climate emergency, personal impact and responsibility, solutions and strategies, and we're going to have an interactive Q&A with Rika. A little bit about Rika. Rika is a social and environmental scientist and climate coach, working with schools, youth organizations, and activists to address the personal side of the climate crisis. So Rika, maybe you can give us a little bit more information about yourself, what you do, and then we can go into the topic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, so my name is Rika. I sit in Sweden, originally from Germany, but I moved to Sweden 6 years ago, and that's where I live and work now. And I started working around climate change and with climate change issues probably about a decade ago. One of the highlights for me was when my son was born. That's when I got really irritated about what's going on around me. And that's why I started getting more interested. And then I took on coaching training and applied psychology training about 5 years ago. And that's where I realized that while we can talk about climate change and all the things that are happening, there is a personal side to it. And that's where I work now. That's questions around how do we deal personally with what's going on in the world. And the title of the webinar is actually Climate Emergency, because I don't like the word climate change, because that implies that it's just changing to something else. But we are in an emergency. Some people also call it crisis. So we are in a state now where frankly, we don't know where it's going. But before I get into that, I was going to ask you, maybe since we're just a few people, we can do it by show of hands. The first question that I have to read this now. Are you aware of the causes of the climate emergency? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. Up and down, okay, up. Okay, cool.
I think I know something, but I didn't really say I know everything. So I know some of the causes. Okay.
Okay. So, and how informed do you feel about the causes of the climate emergency? On a scale from 1 to 10, if we say, well, we can't really do left and right here because it's like sometimes the picture is mirrored. So maybe we can just unmute for a moment, and on a scale from 1 to 10, like 1 being I don't have a clue, to 10, I feel really well informed and I know what's happening. 1 to 10, or maybe just in the chat.
You want to write in the chat, Keith?
Just a quick number, so that I know where we're at.
Maybe.
Cool.
Can I ask a question based on that question? So when you say climate emergency, what specifically do you say is the climate emergency to know whether I'm aware of that or not?
You're getting to the heart of the entire issue, because there is I will talk about this. So climate emergency as such, it's an umbrella term for many crises, and we often call it polycrisis as well. So I just wanted to get a spectrum. Like Gary says, he's somewhere in the middle, where you feel yourself sitting, whether you feel extremely informed and you're all aware, or that we don't really care about it, and yeah, you don't know. So that was my starting question, because I just need to get a bit of an idea. So just, it doesn't really matter too much where we are. I just want, like I said, I just want to get a feel about the climate crisis. It's not just climate. There is many more things going on, but we only have an hour, and I can't go into everything that I would like to go into. But let me maybe, so thank you for your answers. But maybe I will share my presentation, because I've prepared a little starting presentation. Gary, if you could let me share.
Yeah, but so Keith, you didn't put your number in there. Where we've got David, who's put +10, and I put the halfway. And Keith, you're.
Well, you see, there's more questions than answers about that whole area. Is it about CO2? Is it about sea level rising? Is it about how much of a crisis actually is there?
Yeah.
These are all things that they are sort of up in the air for me.
Yeah. And let me address that a little bit in a few minutes, and then we can take the question again and see where we land, and whether it makes more sense when I talk about it. So like I said, I thought about calling this climate emergency rather than climate change in us, which is, like I said, always a difficult term, because change can be good, but emergency, it's not good. It's not, we're not in a state where everything will be fine and it's gonna be okay. We're not at that point anymore. So I thought today that I would just go through a few things, and I like these 5 steps that Kim Nicholas came up with, and she says that there's 5 steps in the whole agenda. First, we have to acknowledge that it's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, and we can fix it. And I like these 5 steps because at least they give us a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, but I want to go through the first 4, and then we can explore the final one together a little bit. I do have a few ideas, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to also come in with a few, because Gary said that this is the topic of the session today, that we also brainstorm together. So yeah, it's warming. I've pulled up this graph, and David has already said that he's very aware. You've probably seen one of these graphs way too many times, and I don't want to bore you too much, but I did like this graph here, because this talks about sea surface temperatures for the belt around the equator, and this is taken from the European Union's Copernicus Institute, which researches climate and climate abnormalities. And this is the most recent one from May 2024. And it already shows that our oceans are warmer than they ever used to be since we started recording. And why is this important? Water stores warmth, water stores heat. And if that heat gets released, that has a knock-on effect, whether it's the hurricane season in the US, or it's, for example, a weakening of the Gulf Stream, which would lead to cooling of Northern Europe. So there is a lot of knock-on effects that we need to take into consideration, but looking just at sea surface temperatures has a huge impact on the entire globe. And like I said, there is a gazillion graphs out there that talk about climate change, and or that climate emergency, and I talk about a warming planet. This is just one of them, but it's one of the most recent ones, and I frankly find it one of the most scary ones, because it shows that we are on the trajectory to a warming planet overall. Yeah, you can see the orange line is last year, and we are already above that from last year. I'll let you read these headlines for a moment that I just pulled from Google, putting in weather 2024 and headlines. And I put an Easter egg in there, and I would like one of you to tell me which one that is.
Which one's a mistake?
It's not a mistake, but it's something that might not fit the normal beak. Anyone?
It all looks real to me.
Yeah, so they are all real, but what I'm hinting at is the one at the bottom left from the Associated Press about Chile, that an
Yeah.
unusual autumn freeze grips parts of South America. So that is unusual, and the reason why I put it in is because often we talk about warming and we talk about warming effects, and I just showed you a graph that the oceans are warming. But that doesn't mean there will be A, no more seasons, and B, it also doesn't mean that seasons will be out of sync. So here, like I said in the intro, I live in Sweden, and we had this winter, the coldest ever recorded temperatures of -47 degrees Celsius in the north of Sweden. That was the coldest ever. And that is also in line with the climate emergency, which means that it's not just warming, it's also cooling, and temperature variations are going to get stronger and stronger. And that's why I put this Easter egg in here, because this is part of what we're talking about. That we're not just talking about it getting warmer and having nicer summers, but we are also talking about stronger deviations in temperatures, sometimes from day to day, but certainly over a period of a season. And it also doesn't mean that we're not having seasons anymore. So no one will, those of us who live in seasons, in distinct seasons of the year, they will not disappear. So this is,
Yeah, I think just sharing what's happening in Italy. We've had so much rain in the last month. It's incredible because Italy is a warm country, and usually I think I read somewhere only in, I think in 2013 it had like the hottest day. I think it was a couple of days ago where they had 32 degrees, and then recently we've had like 8 or 9 degrees. So the temperatures are dropping, but also we're getting a lot of rain as well, which is like flooding the rivers and the streets and so on. So that's causing more.
So that has to do with what I showed before, that warmer air holds more water, and then that results in more rain, but it also results in drier area. So that's why we talked in the beginning a little bit about just climate, about CO2 emissions. That's not the whole story. And weather is getting more extreme. Although I do want to point out at this point that weather is not climate. So it's very distinct. Whether it gets warmer on a day, and like I said, nicer summers, sure, but climate is a long-term trend. Weather is not climate. So cold freeze I have to also point that out. It can be a result of climate changing. It can also be just a random event. So that's one of the problems that we only see in long-term observations, whether that is related to the climate emergency or whether that was just an outlier. But there are increasingly studies, and the graph that I showed you before, there are increasingly studies that show this is all related. This is not just a random occurrence because it's weather. So that is important to keep in mind. It's not weather, and yes, more rain is often associated with climate change, and the same as more drought, and the same as stronger winds, and the same as cold snaps and heat snaps and all that. It's related, but it might not be the cause. But if you ask me, it is. But again, I'm not a climate scientist. I don't set up these climate models, and I can't tell you with certainty that yes, because there is more water going down in Italy, it will definitely be a cause of climate change. So that's not real. That's not how, unfortunately, how it works, which makes it all the more difficult, right? It makes it more difficult to communicate. It makes it more difficult to understand, and that's why climate change is often called a wicked problem. It's
However, Rika, the man in the street will see that. I mean, he gets a lot of information talking about the climate emergency, climate crisis, but he doesn't really see the ice packs melting and so on. So what does he or she see is the rain coming down in the month of June that it normally doesn't. So I think the point also you made is very clear that climate is not the weather. So climate is like a long-term trend or programming to understand.
So just to make it clear that there is climate change and there is weather, and the two things do belong together, but they don't necessarily cause each other. So I just wanted to make that clear, because that often gets muffled up, and like you say, the ordinary person on the street will tell you, yes, it's climate change, but it might just not be, or it might be. We will know in about 5 years' time. But I wanted to go a little bit further and invite you to, for a moment, to think about what the world would look like if we weren't here, if there was no humans. Like, you can think about dinosaurs walking the earth. You can think about really tall trees. You can think about open fields, just lots of green, probably lots of untouched water. You can think about sunsets that are undisturbed.
But definitely more vegetation.
Yeah. I put this picture. Oops. I'll put this picture here. This is probably not quite undisturbed, but that's what it could look like if we weren't here. That's what the sun would still rise and set every day, but that's what it could look like if we weren't here. And this is what it looks like when we are here. And this is to show that sometimes people say we're not responsible, we can't change the weather. And I'm saying, yes, we do, because we changed the face of the earth so much. And this is just one picture. And this is hinting at CO2 emissions, but I also want to, and we said that in the beginning, polycrisis, we are today a force of nature. We are the biggest species that exists on Earth. We have the most influence. We change the face of the Earth faster than nature would itself. So every time you see a truckload of stones, those stones get moved faster by us than they would ever by natural forces. And so saying that we humans have no influence on the climate, I'm not buying it, because we have a much bigger impact on our planet Earth at the moment than any species has ever had. And so that's why I put the picture here, thinking about it's us who's changing the climate, because we have such a huge footprint on our planet at the moment. And at the same time, I also want to point out that we are on this planet, but the planet does not rely on us. We are here as guests. And if we destroy our living biosphere, we're destroying ourselves. The planet is going to be around for another 4 billion years, approximately, until everything collides. Whether we're here or not doesn't really, for our planet, doesn't really matter much, but it matters for us. And we are killing ourselves. We're committing suicide by continuing the way we have, and by continuing to setting up sunsets like the one at the bottom.
So that's referring to all of that is like some sort of production, right?
It's our lifestyle. It's the way we live at the moment. We don't live in sync with nature. We don't appreciate what we have. We live above our limit. We have, and I can't quote the dates on it, but I think in March, Sweden surpassed its footprint globally. I think we passed it. And again, please don't quote me, but in the first half of the year, especially, definitely. And that means that we have used up the resources that our country, our planet has until a certain day of the year. And after that, we live on borrowed resources that we don't actually have anymore. So our planet is we're getting too many, but our planet is also not able to sustain us any longer.
Okay, so it's not recreating any extra
No.
resources to be used. Okay.
Yes, so, and that applies to many things. So we often talk about fossil fuels. That is one aspect, but there is more. There's our soils. Our soils are eroding at the moment because we're pumping more and more fertilizer into them that the plants then can't take up, and that over time erodes the soil, because when you till soil, it turns into dust over time. And that's what's happening now. We're losing agricultural land faster than we can watch, really, because the way agriculture was done over the last 50 years meant that more soil is destroyed than it is regenerated over time. Another force of nature, but this is getting really complicated. I just want to make the point here that we are a force of nature here. We're not innocent. We can't just claim it wasn't us. We are doing a lot, and we are some research call the time frame that we live in at the moment Anthropocene, which means the age of men, which is what we live in now. We changed the face of the earth the same time as we live here, and just the thought, I personally find it pretty scary, but it is important in a discussion about the climate emergency to understand that we have an impact. We're leaving a footprint.
I think most people are aware of that, Rika, right? That they're leaving an imprint, a carbon.
Are we though? Are we all conscious that every time that, not just when we drive a car, but every time we consume something, every time and I get to the bigger impacts later, but every time we get our wallet out, we make a statement in the world through the chain of goods and services that are attached to that. So it's, yes, maybe not you at the moment, but overall we are as a species leaving a larger footprint that we can bear, and that's a problem. But I'll show you the next one, because that turns it around a little bit. Like I said, the planet doesn't need us, we need the planet. And this is taken from the American Health Association, so specifically for the US, and it just gives you an idea of what it actually means to live on a warming planet, what it means to live with the effects of climate change and all other crises that we're looking at. And I'll give you a moment to read it. So this is just an idea about what it means to live on a planet that is altered by our behavior and our doing. And
just looking at this, I just understand which one of these little sort of icons has affected me or affects me personally. And I've understood that allergy, for example, I've recently been suffering more and more with allergies, and I don't know why, whether it's the food, whether it's the air, whether it's the temperature, the water, recently I've had some of these that there doesn't seem to be an explanation. I've had sort of tests and so on, but no one's come up with an explanation. So they just gave me one of the what do they call it? Histamine.
Antihistamine, yeah.
Yeah, one of those, and it goes away, but I never know what's caused it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't diagnose, I'm not a medical doctor, but I can tell you there's so many aspects. So for example, in the chart here, it also talks about heat, so dehydration and heat stroke, so the effects of heat. There are now studies that link increasing heat to domestic violence. So the more heat we suffer, the warmer it gets, the more likely we are to portray aggressive behavior towards each other. And it's a lot. So there's someone in the waiting room. Should I just admit that person?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see that. No, I don't think so.
No.
No, I can't see anyone.
There you
Oh
go.
no, there is. I think
Oh,
you're
because-
not. Sorry, this is legit.
Oh yes. You got Joy. Can you let her in?
Yeah.
Oh, she's in. Okay, thank you. Hi, Joy.
So anyway, this is just a very brief overview, and the issue that I work with is the mental health crisis. So the whole aspect of how do we deal with individually and as a global society with the effect of climate change on our mental health, because so increases in heat also increases levels of aggression. But then there's also something called PTSD, so not post-traumatic stress disorder, but pre-traumatic stress disorder, which talks about the effect of an envisioned future catastrophe on our life today. So eco-anxiety, for example, is one of the things that we throw around a lot, but PTSD is a lot more stronger because it does affect people in their daily life. So there was discussions around whether families have children, whether you should start a university degree, whether you should take up a job anywhere. So it changes people's outlook on life, and in particular, the younger generation is increasingly unsure of how to plan their lives because we don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of researchers say that the decade now until the 2030s is the decisive decade where either we make it or we break it, and what the temperature increase overall will be. At the same time, and not to be the devil here, but at the same time, CO2 emissions keep rising, temperatures keep increasing, and so there's another person, and we are not on track to reaching any kind of leveling out by 2030. And that is also not to say that the CO2 emissions that are in the air now will disappear when we stop burning fossil fuels, because they will not. They stay in the air. CO2 probably around 100, 200 years. Methane comes down a little bit quicker, but CO2 stays in the air. So whatever we do pump into the air now, our grandchildren will still be affected by it. So,
Rika, I was just reflecting. I mean, I agree with you. I think being more aware, being more informed, and people like yourself informing us, and then you go somewhere like I was recently in Egypt, in Cairo, and the city of Cairo, I think it has 26 million inhabitants, and the traffic and the chaos and the pollution, 24 hours. And so there are people that are informed, and there are other people who are not informed, or they're just surviving. And so when we talk about the mass of informing more people, how do we get the message to those kind of people where they're just surviving on a daily basis just to get to the end of the day, that what they're doing is damaging the planet?
So that is a question I'm not taking up today, because that is a whole different debate. Climate justice is the big word here, because we live in an unjust world, right? Like we have people who are not able to make it to the end of the day, who are not able to make it to the end of the month, and they cannot afford literally to think about long-term effects of climate change on their lives. And so the climate justice is a huge issue. and I don't have time to focus on that today.
It was just a reflection, Rika. I
Yes.
was not looking for an answer, but it was just like,
Yeah.
as we talk and we try to discuss and we get informed, we understand that we could do more, and then we come, we do go and see other realities where it's just a complete disregard for everything around them, but then you understand they're in a different situation to we are. So,
yeah. And I'll be honest, the way I react to these things is that's when my anxiety goes up, because that's when I think, how can you? That's when the psychological effects of climate change kick in for me. And that's where I work on this intersection, because there's a lot of people, increasingly a lot of people like myself, who see what's going on, and to know what's going on and what that means. And then to bring these two together is extremely difficult. And oftentimes you just have to go to a place where you go, I can't hold this any longer, and I need to let it go. I can't educate the world, and I can only do what I can in my sphere. And I can't go to Cairo and tell everyone to stop driving their car because it's polluting the planet. It's extremely difficult, but it's, in order to stay sane, it's the only way. And if you can talk about it, and if you're able to, in your sphere of influence, work with what you have, then that's the only thing that you can do.
If there are any comments from the guests, David, Keith, Joy, or Mariam, please, feel free just to put your hand up. David, you got to.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, good. I'm a former pilot, and when you're navigating, today it's different. You have what's called a glass cockpit, where you have it all done like you do in your car with your maps and all that kind of stuff. But in the old days, you didn't have that, and you had to use what's called flight maps. And those flight maps changed every 3 months, and you had to get a new one every 3 months, because like a map, coordinates are based on the true north and true south poles. But your compass, which is built into your navigation system in your car, truck, or something like that, or even in the airplanes, is magnetic based. So it's based on the magnetic poles. And what a lot of people aren't realizing or understanding is the magnetic field that goes around the Earth, which goes between the two magnetic poles, is in bad shape. It is fluctuating, and the scientists don't know what to think about it. But the reason I mention it is, when you fly and you navigate, if I wanted to go from point A to point B, I can't just point my airplane toward point B from point A. There's factors that affect that. One is that magnetic field deviation, which affects my compass. And the other thing is weather. And that weather has an effect on also how you move your airplane. You don't go straight from point A to point B. If you have wind coming, say, from your left, it's going to push your airplane over to the right. And so you'll miss the city you're trying to go to. So you have to cock your airplane, yaw is what they call it, so that it's, I'll try to get my face going to the front. So if I want to go straight like this and the wind is coming from my left, I have to turn my airplane toward the left into the wind, so it will blow me straight to the city I want to go to. But the reason I bring that up is the magnetic poles are changing fast, real fast. Right now, the magnetic north is sitting up in the upper part of Greenland, and Russia's trying to call Greenland their territory, because that magnetic pole is moving so far away from the true poles. The true poles are what the planet spins around. But the magnetic poles is what causes the tilt of the Earth toward or away from the sun. And so that's why you see the major weather changes you're going to see will be in winter or summer. Summer if you're in the northern hemisphere, winter if you're in the southern hemisphere. And that's why they had a hard time calling it, you know, a global warming, global cooling at one time. Now there's just climate change. The thing is, the climate is changing. And there's not much we can do about it. But we can try to clean up our planet. We can try to clean up ourselves. We had a big, huge pipeline coming from the oil sands in Canada all the way down here to Houston. And it got stopped being built in Oklahoma. There are protesters in there for 2 years protesting the pipeline. President Biden, when he got in office, shut it off the first day he was in office. So then protesters left. And what did they do? They left 2 years of pollution all over that farmland. It took them 2 years to get it cleaned up. It's going to take another 2 years before they can plant crops. That's not a good thing. And these are people who are supposed to be, quote, caring for the planet. Now, when I listen to you talk, I like what you say. And the reason I like what you say is you understand there are some issues out there that some people don't quite understand, but they talk like they do.
Mhm.
So I've liked what you said so far.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Oh, I'm going to leave in about 5 minutes too. I've got.
Can I just ask you a follow-up question about the pilots? Because that's something that I read the other day, that apparently now, because of the weather changing and the higher, correct me if I'm wrong, but the higher atmosphere, there was more sinkholes. And there was a case just recently of extreme turbulences in the air that the pilot was not able to see, where the air just suddenly dropped and the plane just suddenly dropped into a hole. And there were people that had broken bones and all that on planes because the air is moving differently in the higher stretches.
Yeah, but that happens all the time. It's been happening ever since I was flying, so it's nothing new.
Okay.
What is new is the jet stream is changing because there are some high pressure systems and some low pressure systems that are making more dramatic moves. And so that affects wind direction, and that's going to affect where a plane wants to go down or up, because you have the low pressure go down, high pressure go up. And if they're real close to each other, you have the winds that are opposing each other, and that will cause a plane to drop.
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, I'm not 100% sure how that happened, and I think that was also the cause of the rain flood in UAE just like a month ago.
Oh yeah.
That the jet stream changed and suddenly made something else and then released its power on a desert town.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was for about a whole month, and then it's followed by all these insects and everything else that came in. It's like Moses waved his wand again.
Yeah. Flooding of the Red Sea. Keith, you got any insights on this? And
yeah, I'm just wondering where, because what you said about the rain, all the rain that's fallen where you are. I was on my power walk on Sunday morning, and it was completely blue skies. And I looked up, and there was all these chemtrails in parallel all the way across, which I realized they're at it again. And in the afternoon, the whole place was overcast. So where does weather manipulation come into all this? What they're spraying up there, the HARP weather system to control the weather. I mean, you had the big Texas freeze there where windmills actually froze over in Texas. That was, I believe, weather manipulation. So weather manipulation has a huge effect on what people are seeing on a day-to-day basis. And there are mechanisms to control all that. And where does that fit into everything here?
I can't give you a definite answer on that. All I know is that we don't, as much as I like to believe that we have the power to change a lot, we don't have the power to change weather on a global scale. We have the power, from what I understand again, we have the power to change in a very, very small geographical area. So if Putin wants to have a military parade in Moscow, he's able to clear the skies, but that's about it. Like, we can't go further than that, just because of the amount of coverage we would need in order for anything to change. But again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's as far as I understand it, that the rainstorm, there was also rumors that the UAE rainstorm was caused by weather manipulation, but everything I read was it can't be. It could not have been that much.
Well, there are several HARP weather stations to put up millions of watts up into whatever's already been seeded into the sky to adjust things. And remember, back in Vietnam War, they were creating rainstorms to flood out the Viet Cong that were dug in. So they've been doing it that long ago. I have to imagine they have upscaled their capabilities since then.
But David, you had your hand up. Yeah.
Can I mention something? Are you sure you're not seeing contrails? The
difference between a contrail and a chemtrail is a contrail is going to be gone about this much behind the plane. A chemtrail,
it's a long
you will
way.
see it the whole way across the sky, and they're traveling in parallels all the way.
Yes,
all the way beside each other.
Contrails are miles and miles and miles long. What it depends on is the atmosphere. And so it's always going to have more moisture in the upper atmosphere than it is in the lower atmosphere. And when you look at aircraft, you have the wings, and you look out, you see that wing, and it ends over there. And some of them have these things called winglets that stick up. The ones that have winglets don't leave contrails. They're short. The ones without winglets leave long contrails. I mean, you can see them across the state of Texas if you follow the airplane long enough.
Yeah, but there's contracts with aviation companies to actually spray the chemtrails.
Contrails.
No, chemtrails. There are contracts with air companies to spray the chemtrails.
Okay, usually you don't see that in the upper atmosphere though.
No, but the contracts are there. They wouldn't be paying people to spray it if they weren't spraying it.
Well, it's like in Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam era vet, and when they sprayed in Vietnam, it was low-level spraying. I mean, you were treetop spraying. So it's a different type airplane, and it's just different.
Yeah, if you research it, you'll actually see the planes and the big containers that's in them. There's a picture of Angela Merkel and a couple of others in a plane that's doing the chemtrails with the big vats in them, and you can see sometimes where it's turned off and turned on again, and you're not going to have a condensation trail turning off and turning on again.
No, but if you look at farmers, they use a lot of times they use the old biplane. Sometimes they use small single wing.
Completely different. That's spraying crops.
Yeah, they're spraying crops.
There's another thing about CO2 is people who have large scale greenhouses are putting in extra CO2 into the greenhouses to get better plant coverage or better plant growth. So if they have to put extra CO2 in, would that indicate there's a shortage normally?
Rika?
I don't know about that.
So I'll be honest, this is very murky territory now that we're going into, because this is not scientifically proven. I'd like to speak to someone who does that if it's true. But this is an argument that I'm dealing with on a political basis here, because I haven't said that I'm politically active. And this is an argument that is thrown around by climate change deniers. And I do not want to go into this debate. If you want to, I have a few more slides and we can go through that.
No. Rika, we can go with your slides, and then maybe Keith or David can contact you directly if they want to have this conversation. But yeah. I mean, me personally, I would just like to have a little bit more insight into, Keith, thank you. That weather manipulation, I think that's another topic to go into there, definitely. But I think today's today's meeting or today's get together, just have an oversight on what's happening. So maybe the next slide, Rika.
Yeah, so this is actually I would like to point out that there is scientists who work on the effects of climate change in the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change set up by the United Nations is the biggest organ that I turn to and we need to all listen to, because they are the ones who collect and sift through the scientific literature that exists. So for the last report that was released last year, they used 66,000 sources. So I don't want to argue with that, because they are the experts. They are the ones who are able to dissect whether something is hearsay or whether something is scientifically proven. They are the ones who can look at the evidence and tell us, yes, this is happening, or yes, this is just hearsay, like I said. So please, when we talk about data and when we talk about facts and figures, have a look at whether the IPCC backs this or not. Always use critical thinking, always use a little bit of common sense about where you get your news from. There is a lot of theories out there that are just not proven, that are anecdotal, that do not belong in a discussion about the effects of climate change. So I want to put that out there in the umbrella of we're sure, because like I said, the IPCC is the one that tells us and has told us again and again since the late 90s that we are heading towards a warming planet, and that has effect on very many things. And a couple of slides I've actually taken from the latest IPCC report, like this one, for example, that it's bad what's happening to us. And yeah, I'll let you read it, because this sums up what I would say otherwise, just in the words of the IPCC. So it comes back to this, what I had earlier, that climate change is not just a weather event. It's not just something that makes it all a bit nicer, our summers a little bit warmer, but there are knock-on effects on all issues of human life. Whether we're talking about water scarcity and food production, I mentioned the decrease of agricultural land, but it also affects water resources. So, for example, if Gary, you were talking about the increase in rain, there's other areas of the world that will have decreased rain and that have issues with drought. I know that Germany is flooded at the moment. Here in Sweden, we are also pretty lucky that we are more on the water have side and not the water have not side. But there are areas like Spain, for example, where drought is an increasing issue and it's threatening people's lives and it's threatening crop yield. So that is an issue with food production. Health and well-being, I already talked about. City settlements, infrastructure, that is the entire. If we don't have our cities anymore because they're washed away, because they're dried up, where can we go? What's left to do? And then we also have our entire ecosystem, which is under threat by multiple issues, not just the climate emergency, but multiple issues. And we're looking at about 1 million species lost by 2050 out of 6 million that exist on Earth. So there are huge changes going on. And again, it's not just warming climate, but that has knock-on effects on very many issues. And this is just to give you an impression of what we could talk about here.
Yeah.
The problem that I want to point out, and that is something that I see a lot, it's bad because we don't know what's going to happen. And that is bad for our human psyche, because we like to have it planned. We like to know that. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
We
David.
like to know what's going to happen. We like to plan for the future. We like to know that our children have the same future ahead as we did when we were their age, but we don't. We don't know what's going to happen and whether it could all be fine. It could all get much worse. So we just don't know, and that is bad news for us, because our human brain does not does not cope well with uncertainty, and that puts up a lot of psychological logical structures in place. So whether we talk about defense mechanisms, whether we talk about denying, so there is a lot of things that suddenly come into play that are not, that we do unconsciously, that are not planned. Whether we talk about freezing and or fighting, so there's many things going on, and that comes back to the fact that we don't like uncertainty. We can't cope with that. And I'm always on the fence of saying that even the right-wing extremism that we see in politics now is linked to this question, because there is so much uncertainty in the world, and having the possibility, having the promise of going back to safe, I don't know, safe borders, whether it's going back to have the family structures in place again. It's these issues that are promised by right-wing parties that attract voters today, and that leads to more right-wing extremism in politics. But that's my personal opinion. But I see that happening, and going back to the fact that we don't know what's going to happen, and that is bad news. But I want to maybe leave it at that, and leave it with the bad news, and talk a little bit about solutions, because we only have a few minutes left, and I promise brainstorming about that we can fix it. Although I do have to say that I'm very skeptical about that we can fix it, especially in our lifetime, because I don't think we can. I think we can make a contribution, we can lay the foundation today, but we cannot in our lifetime fix the planet and have it go back to where it was when we were children. So, but I put a few ideas together, and I'll just put them up. Number one is my favorite one, because that always comes up when I talk about climate change. People often say, yes, I recycle. And I just say, cool, but please don't stop the earth. So absolutely taking care of, knowing where your waste comes from, what happens to it, is a huge thing. But that is like a drop in the ocean. It won't make any difference. The same as secondhand shopping, also a good idea. It's also very important to tackle the issue of fast fashion, and it's also very important to go back to a circular economy, which is that we repair instead of throwing away. Important issue, but that's maybe 2 drops in the big ocean, because it will only tackle the waste problem. It will only tackle a small part. We can talk about circular economy when it comes to resource extraction a little bit more, then it gets a little bit more interesting, but only just shopping secondhand is not going to fix the climate. Electric cars, electric transportation is a big issue, and it's talked about a lot as a solution to CO2 emissions in particular, but that puts the pressure on consumers. And while transportation contributes to about 20% of CO2 emissions, and by reducing that to go to electric, we can make a difference. It is putting the blame on us individually. So every time I drive my car, I'm supposed to feel bad, while my electricity, for example, still is generated by using fossil fuels. I will come to that in a moment. My banking still supports fossil fuel developments, while my government still subsidizes fossil fuel development. So it's putting the individual at the center of the debate makes it difficult for us to not just fix it, because we can't fix it individually, but it puts the blame on us, and it makes it sound like it's our fault, which it's not. It's our collective fault, and it's fault by those in power today. I just spoke about banks. So what we can do, which does make quite an impact, is to look at your banking, to look at which bank you're with, and where your savings goes. What is your bank involved in? What do they loan money to? Do they support fossil fuel products, also fossil fuel developments? Look at your pension fund. Where does your money go before you use it? Where is it invested? So that the financial sector is a massive player in the entire story, and often underrated, because we don't really worry about once the money is in the bank, but it's doing something while it's in the bank. It doesn't just sit there. So financial sector. Next, learn as much as you can about the effects of climate change, the causes of climate change, the knock-on effects of climate change, the climate emergency in general, the different crises that we talked about. There's a lot of information. Again, use critical thinking, know your resources, know where to look. Do a bit of digging into where you get your information from, but learn as much as you can, because there is so many different avenues to take that it makes it really difficult to give a little bit broader overview. And again, Gary, when you ask me to give you an update of where we're at, I can barely do that, because it's huge, it's massive, and it will affect us and all of our future generations for generations to come. So educate yourself about what's happening and continue to stay up to date. But at the same time, take care of yourself mentally while doing so, because it can get you into a doomsday spiral that doesn't benefit anyone. Yeah, just let me finish this one. So this is something that I want to mention because it's been in the news a lot. So demonstrate and go out and make yourself heard. I'll be honest that I'm not a protester. I don't go out on the street, but I am politically active. And that is something that I do for myself, for my own eco-anxiety, because it helps me to know that I can make a difference. But go out on the street if that is something that you can justify with your values. If that's not you, then find something else to make a difference. And make yourself heard, make your opinion heard, and stand up for what you believe in. And the final one, and I didn't ask that in the beginning, but more than half of the world's population is going to vote this year. And this voting year, so 2024, is one of the most influential votes that we have. So if you have the opportunity this year, go and vote. And we have European Parliament election coming up this week. And I've been campaigning until just half an hour ago, because making climate the center of this election is one of the most important things that we can do, because that will really make a difference on a grander scale. So that's what I had.
Well, thank you. Looking at the we can fix it. I mean the recycling waste. Yeah, looking a little bit more at my consumer habits. I'm looking at that. Asking myself, do I really need it? And those kind of questions before I buy, whereas before I would just buy. So I'm becoming a little bit more aware. I don't look at what my bank does with my money, which maybe I should do. I haven't really thought about that, but I'm sure they're using some of my money. I don't know where they're using it. Voting, I'm still waiting for my Italian citizenship, so I can't vote here. It's going to. I've only been here 25 years, but I still haven't got my Italian citizenship. It's a very slow bureaucracy here. I've got an electric scooter. So yeah, I'm trying to make some, I got that, and trying to actually get some more information. I think that's true. As for protesting, maybe I'll leave that for my kids, maybe not for myself. I don't know.
Like I said, don't limit yourself to protesting on the street. There's multiple ways. You can even garden, and that's your form of protest. So there's no one size fits all solution here. The important thing is to make yourself heard, to get informed, to find something that you care about, and then either if you support an organization that tries to rectify the effects of biodiversity loss by building birdhouses, do that, build birdhouses, or have plants growing in your garden instead of just grass, or this is just this. Like with Thursday, I just went a few pictures and I need a few ideas for you. There's a lot you can do, but getting informed and really finding what you can do in your local area. You can, so many things, but getting yourself informed is the most important part. other than voting.
Yeah, Keith, what are you? We're coming to the end now. So,
Yes.
what are you taking away from this hour spent together?
I'm always open to everything and analyze and see what fits.
I just
Listen
stopped
to
the share.
your gut.
pricing.
Listen to your gut. You know.
Yeah. I think it's good to every so often get in, sort of have these updates on what's happening, whether you already know it, you've actually know more, but just so we all update each other. So, I mean, what am I taking away? That we were talking about climate and weather. A lot of people just say the same thing, but it's not. When they talk about it, but they're more referring to the weather rather than the climate, because it's what they are in contact with immediately at that moment. So whether it's a heat wave or whether it's a drought or whatever. And also the planet, I think very important to know that the planet doesn't need us. We need the planet. The planet doesn't need us. So that's a very important thing as well. As for weather manipulation, I'm going to look at the documentary that Keith sent me. I'm going to look at that, trying to sort of inform myself, get some more information. And yeah, Rika, thank you for coming. Thank you for spending your time and informing us of what's happening. And hopefully we'll continue. Keith, thank you for coming. Mariam too, and David Stevens too. The recording is going to be on the YouTube, so if you want to go and see it or share it, you can go on the YouTube channel. Okay, and I'll see you next week at the BEwell on Tuesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Central European Time. Okay, thank you.
And also